resolves that matter. Joining me now is Congressman Ted Lieu of California, Charlie Sykes, editor-at-large of The Bulwark, and former federal prosecutor Glenn Kirshner. And Glenn, I'm going right to you on this. Donald Trump tweeted himself why he fired Michael Flynn. Michael Flynn is obviously a loyalist, but this feels, I think, to a lot of people like the start, that this is the phase in the Trump movie where he just starts pardoning all the criminals around him. Is that what you see here?
Yeah, I think this is probably the first, at least the first recent pardon in what will become a long line of corrupt pardons. And I think the real challenge will be for the incoming Biden administration. When President-elect Biden is sworn in and appoints a law-abiding attorney general, that person will have to decide whether to challenge some of these corrupt pardons, because just as Donald Trump corruptly commuted a sentence of his basically co-conspirator Roger Stone virtually on the day or a couple of days before Roger Stone was to report to prison to begin serving a 40-month sentence, I maintain that was a corrupt pardon or corrupt commutation. This is similarly a corrupt pardon of somebody who was cooperating with the Mueller probe, presumably providing information against Donald Trump, pled guilty not once but twice in court, and all that was left was for him to be sentenced. I think the incoming attorney general will have his or her hands full with respect to challenging these corrupt pardons.
You know, and Congressman Lieu, you've got the Wall Street Journal going sort of deeper into some of the other things that he did. I mean, this is not just the guy we remember from chanting "lock her up" at the 2016 Republican National Convention, which is what probably most people know him for. This is a guy, Michael Flynn, who allegedly planned to forcibly, basically kidnap a Muslim cleric who's living in the United States and deliver him to Turkey. Under the alleged proposal, Flynn and his son, Michael Flynn Jr., were to be paid as much as $15 million for delivering Fethullah Gulen to the Turkish government, basically renditioning him for cash. That is the character of the man that Donald Trump has fired. Yet you have Lindsey Graham, still Lindsey Grahaming, calling it a great use of the pardon. A-OK, great job, Donald. I wonder what you make of this and whether, I mean, I can still recall, I'm old enough to remember when Bill Clinton did a pardon for which Republicans would love to see him clacked in leg irons at the end of his presidency. What do you make of this?
Thank you, Jory, for your question. As a former prosecutor, I find it very distressing to see Donald Trump's repeated attacks on the rule of law. And this is yet another example of the outrageous behavior of Donald Trump. And that's why the voters fired him, because he repeatedly put himself and his friends above the law. And in this case, Michael Flynn committed a felony, and no ordinary American would have gotten this pardon but for the fact that they were friends with the president. And for conservatives to cheer this on, they should understand the precedent this is setting. That would mean in future administrations, whether Democratic or Republican, administration officials can lie in law enforcement investigations and then get a pardon from the president. That is very distressing to our system of checks and balances.
You know, and there was a time, Charlie, when it would have been distressing to conservative Republicans, the idea that a national security advisor would be having secret conversations with our adversary, Russia, to tell them, don't worry, you won't have to worry about sanctions when our guys get in. We'll take care of you, and undermine U.S. foreign policy, in addition to trying to rendition people and committing those sort of open acts of corruption. What you're seeing here, I guess, from Lindsey Graham, and I'm sure Marco Rubio, since, he's busy when he's not, like, being mad that Ivy League people are getting jobs, will all cheer it because they don't think that there ever should have been a Russia probe. So maybe that's maybe that's the through line here, or is there something I'm missing?
No, I mean, look, there's so much to talk about here. The president himself fired him after being warned not to hire him by President Obama. Michael Flynn is not an innocent man. He pled guilty twice. He is a convicted felon. He will not be able to plead the Fifth Amendment if there are criminal investigations going forward. Even Richard Nixon knew better than to pardon his co-conspirators. So this is part of the ongoing pattern that we've seen from the administration. It's also, I think, part of the ongoing pattern of the obstruction of justice. I do have to push back a little bit. I do not think that the Biden administration is going to challenge these pardons. The president's pardon power is sweeping. I think that you've seen the extent to which Donald Trump has been willing to abuse this. But going forward, I think once again we need to put on the table, is this president above the law? Did he, in fact, obstruct justice? Is that pattern continuing? And I think for the folks who are thinking, OK, let's turn the page, let's move on. He could not be charged criminally because he was the sitting president. And since he's no longer in office, let's let bygones be bygones. That would literally say that Donald Trump has gotten away with his obstruction of justice and that he is above the law. And I completely agree, though, this is the beginning of what is going to be a series of pardons, including Paul Manafort and others, perhaps Gates. But I think this needs to put on the table, are we going to let Donald Trump continue the pattern that was documented in great detail in the Mueller report?
Well, and Glenn, I think that's the problem, right? I mean, we've established, I think, pretty plainly that presidents can openly break the law. They can defy the Hatch Act. They can pretty much do whatever they want if they're willing to do it, because they're all just suggestions in the Constitution. They're not laws. You've got a whole gang of bad guys here, as you just heard Charlie mention, from Steve Bannon to Paul Manafort to Rick Gates, who's been on TV. He was on Ari Melber's show begging for a pardon openly. Michael Cohen, who's ain't going to get one because he wrote a book and he told the truth about Trump. Roger Stone, who's already been commuted. I mean, the kinds of things that these people have been up to, that they've done, the ways in which they've undermined American foreign policy, and the fact that they could do all of that and walk away, that's much worse than what happened with Nixon. So I wonder, what do we do? What's the point of having any laws at all if anybody around the president can just break them all and then they walk away with a pardon?
Yeah, and it doesn't seem right, Joy, that the Office of Legal Counsel at the Department of Justice says you cannot charge a sitting criminal president. And then I'm with Charlie. If after Donald Trump and his criminal associates are out of power, if we decide to let bygones be bygones, turn the other cheek, put the long national nightmare behind us, what have we just railed against Bill Barr for doing for the past few years? Corruptly shielding Donald Trump and his criminal associates from accountability. If the next administration declines to go after them for the crimes they committed while Donald Trump is in office, then guess what? We are no better than the Bill Barrs of the world.
That's the point. And I think, Congressman Lieu, I think then I'll throw it to you just as a member of Congress. Is there any place left for the American people to go if, in fact, all of these people walk away scot-free with pardons? Is there anything left for us to do legislatively? Is there some remedy against them being able to commit more? I mean, they're basically then free to just commit crimes at will, I guess, just because they're friends of Trump.
The more outrageous acts that Donald Trump engages in, the harder it will be to let bygones be bygones. My view is we should follow the facts wherever it may lead. And one of the problems that we discovered the last 4 years is that congressional subpoenas are relatively meaningless because we can't enforce them. Right now, we're still trying to get Don McGahn to testify before the House Judiciary Committee. We're litigating that subpoena. It's going to take years. So I think we need to pass inherent contempt legislation in the House, which would change the House rules and allow us to fine witnesses who disobey congressional subpoenas. And then we can hold hearings because, as Charlie noted, Michael Flynn loses his Fifth Amendment rights, and he now has to testify about what he knows about Donald Trump and Russia.
Good point. Right. He can't plead the Fifth anymore. I mean, and I just wonder, too, Charlie, if, on the not letting bygones be bygones thing, I think that we need, and Glenn has talked about this, that we need some sort of Truth and Reconciliation Committee. We need to out all that has happened in the last 4 years, because I don't see what would stop. Why shouldn't the Biden team, when they get a subpoena from Lindsey Graham and his Judiciary Committee in the Senate, just say, sod off. We're not doing it. We're not showing up. Why shouldn't the Biden administration follow in kind? That's what the Republicans have set up. They'll howl when the Biden folks do it, but why shouldn't they do it? Why should they listen to anything that Congress says?
Well, I'm sympathetic to the folks who will argue that this would be a distraction for Joe Biden. It would be, Joe Biden really wants to be more of a healer than a divider. But we really have to decide whether or not we are a nation of laws right now. I mean, think about what we saw today. You have the president of the United States basically participate in this stunt on the hallowed grounds of Gettysburg, trying to undermine a democratic election.